My sister mocked my career, but her fiancé turned white when I revealed who I really was. That's the headline, the kind you'd click on late at night. The kind that sounds too dramatic to be true. But it is true. It's my life, summed up in one tidy, shocking sentence. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment, where are you watching from? My name is Natalie Pierce. I'm 38 years old, and for most of those years, I learned how to be invisible. The story of how I became seen, truly seen for the first time, begins at a Thanksgiving dinner table. The air in my parents' house was always thick on holidays, heavy with the scent of roasted turkey, my mother's cinnamon-spiced pumpkin pie, and years of unspoken things. The low hum of polite conversation was a familiar sound, a melody I had learned to disappear into. My role at these gatherings was simple. Sit, smile, and don't make waves. I had perfected it. But that day, my sister Emily decided I shouldn't be allowed to hide. She stood up, the crystal wine glass looking delicate in her perfectly manicured hand. Emily always looked perfect, as if she had stepped out of a magazine. She commanded attention without even trying. The family chatter died down instantly, and every face at the table turned toward her, bathed in adoration. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice as smooth and sweet as honey. She smiled, a wide, camera-ready smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. It was a smile I knew well. It was the smile she used right before she was about to be cruel. "To family," she began, "and to success. I'm so thankful for everything I have." Her eyes landed on her fiancé, Daniel, who was seated beside her. "I'm so lucky to have found a wonderful man to build a life with, a man who knows how to take care of his family." She paused, letting the words settle. Then her gaze shifted, sweeping over me where I sat across the table. The sweet smile tightened just a fraction of an inch. "And to my sister Natalie." My stomach clenched. I knew it was coming. Still chasing her silly little career down in DC, it's a good thing some of us know what's really important. She raised her glass higher. "At least I have a man to take care of me." A wave of laughter rippled around the table. It wasn't loud, booming laughter. It was something worse. It was the soft, pitying chuckle of people who believed she was right. My Uncle Robert's hearty laugh, my aunt's high-pitched titter. My father nodded, a proud, satisfied look on his face. He was proud of Emily, the daughter who had fulfilled her destiny. My mother smiled gently, as if Emily had just said the most charming thing in the world. They were all in on the joke, and the joke was me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a familiar flush of shame. I wanted to shrink into nothing. I looked down at my hands, folded tightly in my lap. I took a breath, and then I looked up. Everyone was laughing. Everyone except Daniel, her handsome, successful fiancé. He was sitting ramrod straight, his smile gone. It had completely vanished. He stared at Emily for a beat, a flicker of something. Disbelief? Annoyance? In his eyes. Then his gaze darted towards me for a split second before he looked down at his plate, suddenly fascinated by his mashed potatoes. He picked up his water glass and took a long, slow sip. In that moment, I just thought he was a decent man, uncomfortable with his fiancée's casual cruelty. I had no idea that his discomfort was not about decency. It was about something else entirely. It was always like this. Growing up in our small 2-story house in Ohio, the roles were cast from birth. Emily was the sun. I was the shadow that trailed behind her. She was born with a bright, easy charm that pulled people in like gravity. She had hair the color of corn silk that fell in perfect, effortless waves, and a laugh that made you want to laugh with her, even if you didn't know the joke. Our parents called her their shining star. They praised everything about her. Her looks, her popularity, her easy grace. They talked about her future as if it were a movie they had already seen and loved, a romantic comedy where she would marry a handsome, wealthy man, live in a big house with a white picket fence, and raise beautiful, charming children. Little copies of herself. I was the quiet one, the serious one. I had plain, mousy brown hair and a habit of looking at my shoes when I talked. I wasn't charming or popular. I spent most of my time with my nose in a book. While Emily was at parties, I was in my room, traveling to other worlds through words. I found comfort in the quiet logic of books, in the clear right and wrong of a math problem. It was a world I could control, a world where hard work equaled results. My report cards were my only currency, a perfect string of straight A's. I remember coming home in 5th grade, clutching the crisp paper in my hand, my heart thumping with a small, hopeful pride. I had won the school's Academic Excellence Award. I handed the report card to my father at the dinner table. He glanced at it, a flicker of a smile on his face. "That's nice, honey. Good job." He handed it back and turned to my mother to talk about the leaky faucet in the bathroom. An hour later, Emily came home, her own report card crumpled in her backpack. It was a mix of C's and a few B's. She also had a funny story about how she had talked her way out of trouble for being late to class. Our parents laughed until they cried. They praised her for her people skills and her spark. The next weekend, my father bought her a new bicycle to encourage her. When I quietly asked why, he just said, "Your sister needs a little boost, Natalie. You don't. You're fine." I was always fine. That meant I could be ignored. The real break, the moment the path of my life diverged completely from their expectations, happened when I was 18. They sat me down in the living room on the floral sofa that smelled faintly of potpourri. It was time to talk about my future. Their plan for me was a carbon copy of Emily's. "You're a smart girl, Natalie," my father said, leaning forward with a serious expression. "You've always been good in school. A man appreciates a smart woman. You could marry a doctor or a lawyer. You could have a very comfortable, stable life." I looked at him, then at my mother, who was nodding in agreement. They saw my intelligence not as a tool for me to build my own life, but as bait to catch a successful husband. "I don't want to marry a lawyer," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I want to be a lawyer." A heavy silence filled the room. My mother looked at my father with worried eyes. He sighed, a long, theatrical sound heavy with disappointment. "Don't be difficult, Natalie," he said, his tone shifting from paternal to frustrated. "That's a hard life for a woman. The hours are terrible. It's stressful. It's a man's world. You won't be happy." "It's what I want," I insisted, a little stronger this time. They called me stubborn. They called me ungrateful. When I earned a significant scholarship to a prestigious law school on the East Coast, they weren't proud. They were terrified. They saw it as me drifting away from the life they had chosen for me, the only life they understood as a happy one. When I packed my bags to leave for Washington, D.C., my mother cried. "You'll be all alone," she whispered. Emily, who was already engaged to a boy from a wealthy local family, stood there with a pitying look on her face. As I drove away from that small house in Ohio, I felt a profound sense of loneliness. I was failing them. In their eyes, I already was. The physical distance between us, hundreds of miles, did nothing to lessen the emotional one. In fact, it gave Emily new ammunition. My life became a cautionary tale she would tell at family gatherings. I would fly home for Christmas or a birthday, steeling myself for the inevitable performance. I remember one Christmas Eve. The house was warm, the tree was twinkling, and carols played softly on the radio. I had been working 60-hour weeks on a difficult case, and I was exhausted, but happy to be home. Emily was opening a gift from her then-boyfriend, a delicate diamond necklace. She held it up for everyone to see, then turned to me. I was sitting on the floor, holding a book I'd been given. "Oh, Natalie, another book?" she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You must have so much time to read, all by yourself in that little apartment. Still single?" The question hung in the air like a sharp, pointed icicle. Every eye turned to me. I just smiled weakly and said, "I'm focusing on my career right now." My answer only made them sad for me. Another time, at a 4th of July barbecue, my uncle was genuinely asking about my work. He was a good man, and he was trying to connect with me. "So what kind of law do you practice, Nat?" he asked as he flipped burgers on the grill. Before I could answer, Emily strode over, a beer in her hand. She laughed her bright, tinkling laugh. "Oh, Uncle Robert, don't get her started. It's something boring in the government. Don't lawyers just argue for pennies all day?" My friend's husband is a lawyer and they're always complaining about money. It sounds so draining. The conversation died. My uncle gave me an apologetic look and changed the subject. My parents never once defended me. They never told her to stop. Her words were just Emily being Emily. My silence, my refusal to fight back, was taken as proof that she was right. But it wasn't agreement. It was survival. I was building a container inside myself, a locked box where I stored every insult, every condescending eye roll, every snide laugh. I didn't know what I was saving them for. I just knew I couldn't let them go. On the quiet flights back to DC, I would stare out the window at the clouds and finally let the tears fall, where no one could see them. I would cry for the family I wished I had, and then I would wipe my eyes, go back to my apartment, and get back to work. My work was my sanctuary. It was the one place where my value was measured by my intellect and my diligence, not by my relationship status. The big dinner was for Emily and Daniel's engagement. It was held at a new, ridiculously expensive restaurant downtown, the kind with low lighting, white tablecloths, and waiters who called you sir and madam. Emily was in her element. She wore a stunning white dress, and her diamond ring caught the light with every gesture. I tried. I really did. I tried to feel happy for her. I walked in with a smile on my face and a beautifully wrapped gift in my hands, a set of expensive crystal wine glasses. When I gave it to her, she barely looked at it. "Oh, thanks, Nat," she said, her eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. She put it on a table with the other gifts and didn't give it a second thought. I sat at the long table, feeling like a foreigner. The conversation swirled around me. Wedding plans, honeymoon destinations, the merits of different gated communities. I had nothing to contribute. My world of legal briefs and federal regulations was a distant alien planet. Daniel, sitting beside Emily, did try to include me. "So, you live in DC, Natalie?" he asked, his voice polite. "I'm there for work sometimes. It's a busy city." Before I could respond, Emily cut in. "Oh, Daniel, don't bore yourself with Nat's work stuff. It's all terribly complicated and dull." She patted his arm possessively, reclaiming his attention. Later, as the main courses were being served, she leaned across the table. In a loud, theatrical whisper designed for everyone to hear, she said, "Don't worry, Nat. Maybe you can babysit when Daniel and I have kids. It'll give you something to do on the weekends, since your career isn't really going anywhere." The table erupted in laughter. It was louder this time, less pitying and more openly mocking. I felt my entire body go rigid. I looked across at Daniel. He wasn't laughing. He looked mortified. He picked up his fork and started cutting his steak with intense concentration, his jaw tight. He wouldn't look at me. He just wanted it to stop. So did I. I felt a familiar knot of shame and anger tighten in my stomach. I just wanted to be invisible again. But the night wasn't over. Emily wasn't done. She was the star of the show, and she needed a grand finale. After dessert, she stood up and tapped her glass with a fork. The room fell silent instantly. "I just want to thank you all for coming," she said, beaming at her audience. She looked at Daniel, her eyes shining with what she wanted everyone to believe was pure love. "I'm the luckiest woman in the world." Then her eyes found me again. That familiar sharp glint was back. This was the kill shot. "I want to make one more toast," she said, her voice loud and clear, ringing through the quiet restaurant. "To real success." She paused for effect. "To finding a husband who provides so you don't have to waste your life in some stuffy office pretending to be important." That was it. That was the line. The one that broke through 20 years of carefully constructed defenses. Pretending to be important. It wasn't just an insult. It was a complete and utter dismissal of my entire existence. Every late night in the library, every exam I'd aced, every sacrifice I had made, every ounce of passion I had for my work, she had just wiped it all away with one sentence. It was all a pretense, a silly game I was playing by myself. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. My blood ran cold, then hot. For years, I had sat in silence. I had swallowed the hurt. I had let them define me as the sad, lonely, career-obsessed spinster. A small voice in my head screamed, "Just get up and leave. Don't make a scene." But another voice, one I hadn't heard in a long, long time, answered it. It was a quiet voice, but it was clear and cold as steel. No, not this time. I looked at my sister's triumphant face. I looked at my parents' proud, nodding smiles. And something inside me, something I thought had died long ago, finally clicked into place. For the first time in my life, I didn't stay silent. A strange, preternatural calm washed over me. The white-hot anger was still there, but it had cooled and hardened into something sharp and precise. It was fuel. I smiled. A small, simple, genuine smile. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. My chair made no sound on the thick carpet. The whole table stared at me, their smiles frozen on their faces. They were expecting a scene. Tears, a choked protest, me running out of the room in shame. They were not expecting this. I didn't look at Emily. I didn't look at my parents. I looked directly at her fiancé. "Daniel," I said. My voice was steady and clear. It didn't shake. I was almost surprised by how calm I sounded. I never knew we'd be seeing each other at this table so soon. Daniel's face, which had been a mask of polite discomfort, began to crumble. Confusion, then dawning recognition, then pure, undiluted alarm washed over his features. He put his fork down with a soft clink. I kept my eyes locked on his. "It's quite a coincidence running into you here. Last week, wasn't it? That I signed off on your company's defense contract request? The one for the new avionics system for the F-35? I have to say," I added, tilting my head slightly, "I wasn't sure you'd get final approval from my office. It was a very close call." The room was so quiet I could hear the fizz of champagne bubbles in a nearby glass. The happy, celebratory atmosphere had completely vanished, sucked out of the room in an instant. Emily let out a short, nervous laugh. "What are you talking about, Natalie? Daniel works in tech. You're not making any sense." Daniel didn't laugh. His face had drained of all color. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He was staring at me, his mouth slightly ajar, as the pieces clicked into place in his mind. He was frantically trying to connect the dots between the quiet, pathetic sister-in-law his fiancé had been mocking all night and a powerful figure from his professional world. He did not like the picture they were making. I finally turned my gaze from Daniel and let it sweep across the table, over my stunned family and Emily's confused friends. Then I let my eyes rest on my sister. "For those who don't know," I said, my voice still perfectly level, "Emily is right. I do work in a stuffy office, and my work is very complicated." I paused, letting the weight of my next words settle before I said them. "I'm the Deputy Chief Legal Counsel for the U.S. Department of Defense." Blank stares. They still didn't get it, so I made it simple for them. Daniel's company is a major defense contractor. That means they build and sell technology to the military. Every multi-million-dollar contract his division applies for, every piece of software or hardware they want to sell to the Army, Navy, or Air Force has to pass through a rigorous legal review. My office and my team of lawyers is in charge of those reviews. I let that sink in. I looked at my father, who always complained about government bureaucracy. I looked at my mother, who thought my job was some kind of secretarial work. Then I delivered the final, inescapable truth. My signature is on the bottom of his company's most recent $100 million deal, a deal that funds his entire division for the next 2 years. I looked directly into Emily's wide, shocked eyes. I guess my silly career, the one where I'm just pretending to be important, isn't so silly after all. The sound of Emily's wine glass shattering on the floor was like a gunshot in the dead silent room. Red wine splattered across the white tablecloth like a crime scene. My parents' jaws were literally hanging open. My father, who had once called my career choice a failure, looked like I had just spoken in a foreign language. My mother's hand was pressed against her mouth, her eyes wide with a horrified understanding. The golden daughter was not the only one with power. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the one with the most. The spell of silence was broken by Daniel, who started stammering, his voice cracking. I didn't realize. Pierce. Your last name. I didn't make the connection. Ms. Pierce? I had absolutely no idea. He wasn't looking at me with discomfort anymore. He was looking at me with a raw, primal fear. He was seeing a person who could, with the stroke of a pen, make his professional life incredibly difficult. Emily, however, wasn't thinking about her fiancé's career. She was thinking about herself. She turned on me, her face contorted in a mask of fury. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "How could you do this to me? On my engagement night, you always have to ruin everything." I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just a vast, quiet emptiness. "I didn't say a word about you, Emily," I replied softly. "I just told the truth about me. You're the one who put my career on trial in front of everyone." The truth was undeniable. It hung in the air, thick and heavy. The golden daughter, the shining star, the woman who had spent a lifetime making her sister feel small, was suddenly the one who looked foolish, the one who looked ignorant, the one who had been completely and totally humiliated by a truth she never bothered to learn. The power dynamic in our family, a dynamic that had been set in stone for 38 years, had just crumbled into dust. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to stick around and watch the fallout. My work was done. Calmly, I picked up my purse from the floor. I looked one last time at the wreckage of the dinner party, at the shocked, pale faces of my family. For the first time, I didn't see disappointment or pity in their eyes when they looked at me. I saw confusion, awe, and maybe even a little fear. And for the first time, it didn't matter what I saw. "Thank you for dinner," I said politely to the room at large. It was very revealing. And then I turned and walked away. I walked through the silent restaurant, my footsteps soundless on the plush carpet. I felt the eyes of other diners on me, wondering what drama had just unfolded. When I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath. It felt like the first clean breath I had taken in 20 years. A massive, crushing weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. 3 days later, an email arrived in my work inbox. The sender was Daniel. The subject line was follow-up on Contract 7A42. It was strictly business, strictly formal, asking for a point of clarification on a minor clause. It was polite, respectful, and addressed to Ms. Pierce. The message between the lines was crystal clear. "I understand. Point taken." My aunt called a week later, fishing for gossip. She said Emily was very quiet lately. The wedding planning had stalled. And my parents, they started calling. Not to apologize. They didn't have the words for that. Instead, they tried to make awkward, stilted small talk. My father, for the first time in his life, asked about my job. So, what is it exactly you do down there in Washington?" he asked, his voice strained. I gave him a simple, brief answer. The calls were hollow, transparent attempts to reconnect now that they perceived me as someone of status. I kept them short. I was polite, but I was distant. The connection they wanted now was one they had thrown away years ago. I don't talk to them much anymore. It's not out of anger. Not anymore. The anger has burned away, leaving behind a clean, quiet peace. There's just nothing left to say. I don't need their approval. I don't need their validation. I spent so many years craving it, feeling like a broken, failed version of a daughter because I didn't have it. But what I learned at that dinner is that their approval was never worth having. It was conditional, based on their narrow, outdated ideas of what a woman's life should be. I built my life, my career, and my peace without them. I did it on my own terms. I worked hard. I was good at what I did. I earned my own success in my own world, by my own rules. Emily mocked me. My parents dismissed me. But the truth revealed itself. It turned out I held the power all along. I just never knew I was allowed to use it. And that's the thing about revenge. You think it's about shouting and fighting and making someone hurt the way you hurt. But it's not. The best revenge is living a life of quiet dignity and unassailable success. It's best served in silence until the one perfect moment comes to simply, calmly, tell the truth. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more.